So requirements lifecycle management, that PDF I have uploaded in the drive. Please go through that PDF, and that recording, it is taking some time. So possibly today, end of the day, I will do it to upload it. And now what I want you is adopt like that Path Vista consultancy case study. Please apply knowledge area 3 to it and work on it. And also we will discuss now strategy analysis. This as well you will apply it, okay? And then we will discuss later on about it, okay? And writing the exams. These days I think you have stopped writing the exams. So please start writing exams as well, okay? Now exams on each knowledge area. If you go to this portal, COEPD portal, you find all these exams. Type in that knowledge area name. Illustration, if you type in illustration, like let me say six exams are there. And next, if you type in requirements life cycle, then there are some 4 or 5 exams are there. I want you to start giving those exams, because once you start giving the exams, you'll get your clarity, you will get more clarity about it, okay? So parallelly, what you have to do, you have to work on Path Vista case study, and then you have to start writing exams as well. So I think we have slowed down on it, okay? Please do these two things parallelly. Got it? Now let us start this strategy analysis. Previous version of BABOK, there is no strategy analysis. They called it an enterprise analysis. Now they changed it to strategy analysis. Now strategy analysis, what it exactly means by strategy analysis, okay? Now here we are going to actually, strategy means how a change is going to happen. As a BA, you can actually understand we facilitate change to happen in an enterprise. So for that change to happen, what all is required, we discuss in this strategy analysis, okay? For that, we are going to analyze the current state, and we are going to define the future state, and we have to assess the risks, and we have to define the change strategies. Therefore, you can understand that we have 4 tasks to perform in change strategy. We have 4 tasks to perform in change strategy, okay? The first one is analyze current state. The second one is define the future state, and then you have to assess the risks. What is going to happen in this, if you are going for this particular change, what risks are involved here? You have to identify those risks, and then you have to define the change strategy. Then you have to define the change strategy. That means how you can move from the current state to the future state. That what is the strategy of moving it, you have to actually understand it. So these are the 4 tasks which we are going to discuss now, okay? Now please mute yourselves. Right, now it's like we need to understand this strategy analysis, how business analysis is going to be implemented as a part of strategy analysis, okay? And what we actually do as a business analyst during this strategy analysis, okay? Now here we need to understand that any change that can happen, it is the change will happen for we need to understand BACCM. Now BACCM, if you can understand, BACCM says that it is a need is there. That need, for that need we need to make a change. We need to make a change, and that change will make it through a solution, okay? And this is influenced or impacted by stakeholders, and the stakeholders will get value because of this particular change. Stakeholders will get value because of this change, and all this will happen. That is, the change is going to happen in a particular context. This change is going to happen in a particular context. So here, if you understand this BACCM, in that you can understand BACCM is all about strategy analysis only. The base of BACCM is strategy analysis, okay? Here what they are saying is that first of all you need to understand the stakeholders, because you need to collaborate with the stakeholders to identify the business need, and you have to enable the organization to address the need and align the resulting strategy for change with the other strategies. Like, let me say, it is like you can't exactly make a change all by yourself. So the impact of this particular change on the enterprise and on the organization and with the other initiatives and the current working conditions, everything we have to consider, then we have to go ahead to propose this particular change. Okay. And before we could start anything, we should understand where we have to reach, with what activity we have to reach where. That is the future state you have to definitely understand. And to reach the future state, some transition states are required. So you need to understand those transition states. Now, please understand, like we have been discussing about the transition requirements. These are temporary requirements or one-time requirements we are saying. In a similar way, here to reach the final destination, to reach the future state, intermediate or transition states are there. So you have to understand those states as well. You have to understand those states as well, because sometimes if you ignore these transition states, you may not reach the future state, because future state is the final destination. To reach the future state, intermediate transition states are required. So you have to understand those intermediate transition states. Okay, so that is how we are going to make it up. Possibly if you want to understand intermediate transition states, like if you take any academic course or syllabus, they have that instead of having the final exam, you have that term exams, midterm exams, term exams, like that. You'll have so many assessments before, and finally you go to the final assessment. Likewise, to reach the final state directly, you can't reach the final state. Intermediate states will be there. You have to reach those states. From there you will reach the final state. Okay. And now once you know this final state, what you want to, where you want to go and where you have to reach it, then you have to discover possible solutions to apply the capabilities of the organization. So you have to understand, like, to reach that particular goal, what are the various options we have and what capabilities the organization have to reach it. You have to first understand it, discover all the possible solutions. Okay. Now, ongoing activity as changes in the business need occurs or new information results in the adjustment to the change strategy. Now, this is very, very important. Initially, as I've been saying, that we have to go with a, even though we start with predictive approach, we should be open to convert into adaptive. That means anything happens while we are making a change, while we are making the change strategy, a new element may come into picture. Because of it, we may require to change the existing change strategy. So we should be open to make up. And most of the times when we started working on the change strategy, okay, it keeps on evolving, changing, because every time we work on a new element, new things we discover. Because of it, the change strategy may change or should change. So we should understand that the change strategy, whatever we define now, is not permanent. As the time progresses in the cycle, we are going to change that as well, right? And here a strategy may be captured in a strategic plan, product vision, business case, product roadmap, and other artifacts. That means a strategy, how we are going to come up with a strategy. They have given, we are given some approach plans, right, where we have to come up with this strategy. They have given it. And for you to understand about the knowledge areas, already we know that 6 knowledge areas are there, out of which we covered business analysis, planning and monitoring, and illustration and collaboration, and requirements lifecycle management we have covered. And now we are working on strategy analysis. And strategy analysis has 4 tasks. One is analyze current state, the second one is define future state, third one is assess risks, and fourth one is define change strategy. So we have 4 tasks here. Fine. And now if you see, understand here, let me magnify it and show it to you. Okay, analyze current state. Okay, analyze current state. If you look into the outputs, we have 2 outputs here. Previously we are only seeing like 1 input in the previous tasks, because requirements has requirements and design. We got individually 2 outputs. For each task we got 2 outputs. Here it is a little different case. Okay, understand that if you analyze the current state output, we will be having 2 outputs. We will be having 2 outputs. What are those 2 outputs? Current state description and business requirements will be the output of the analyze current state. Okay, and define future state, we have here like 1 output, that is okay, we will have 3 outputs here. Define the future state, may we have 3 outputs. These three outputs are business objectives, future state description, and potential value. So when you are defining your future state, how many outputs we are getting? We are getting three outputs. What are they? Business objectives, future state description, and potential value. Okay. And when you go with assessing the risks, then you will get only one output, that is risk analysis results. You'll be getting it. And define change strategy, then here you will get two outputs, change strategy and solution scope. Change strategy and solution scope will be the two outputs. Okay, fine. So first of all, we should be very clear what for we are doing each one, and from there how we are going to make it up. Okay, and here I gave you a list of, because this is like in this particular tasks, in this 4 tasks we find number of elements are little higher here, and we have number of outputs as well little higher. And look at the techniques, the number of techniques which we use and the number of stakeholders are involved. Now if it is analyze current state, we have 26 techniques to actually use, where we can use 26 techniques, and stakeholders involved are 10. If it is define future state, it is 23 techniques and 10 stakeholders are involved. If it is assess risk, it is like 12 techniques and the number of stakeholders involved are 8. And define change strategy, we have to like 20 techniques we'll be using it, and 10 stakeholders are there. That means almost all like a majority of the techniques are used here, and almost all stakeholders are involved here. In this particular strategy analysis, we have to consider all the stakeholders, and almost all techniques are used here. Please understand it. That's why I gave you here one chart for you to understand it. Okay, so number of techniques are when compared to any other what we say knowledge areas, in this knowledge so far what we have discussed knowledge areas, may number of techniques and number of stakeholders are not this elaborative. In this strategy analysis, almost all stakeholders are involved, and majority of the techniques we can use it in these tasks. Fine, we are going to use in these tasks. Now let us discuss about the first one, analyze current state. Okay, when you go with the current state, here we need to understand the reasons why an enterprise needs a state. This is needs a change. We have to understand it. Why we need a change, the reasons we have to understand it very clearly, and then understand what would be directly or indirectly affected by the change. So analyze current state may before what for we are going to analyze this, we have to understand the reasons why an enterprise needs a change, and understand what would be directly or indirectly affected by the change. Okay, that we have to understand it. Now how the current state, how we are going to change occurs in the context of the existing stakeholders, processes, technology, policies of the enterprise. So we have to understand the existing stakeholders, processes, technologies, policies of the enterprise. Okay, and current state can be described at different levels. Okay, from the entire enterprise to small components of the solution. Different levels means the management at the top management may look at the same change in one level, in one point of view. The mid level they may look at different variations, and the lower level may view it as at a different level. So they may have it in different states. Current state we have to understand from different levels. We need to understand it. Okay, and the current state is really like rarely it is static, because you take any process or you take any state. Okay, actually what happens is that it is subject to change, and that change every day small changes will happen. So because of these changes, the current state may force because of the changes in the current state, even the future state may also have let me say some alterations or influence there. So we need to understand that current state once you have declared, it may not be final, because every day small change may come into picture. Okay, and then if you see here, okay, we take needs and illustration results as the inputs, and we analyze the current state. Okay, and the output is current state description and business requirements. We get two outputs, and we do it through these guidelines like a business analysis approach, enterprise limitation, organizational strategy, solution limitation, and solution performance goals, solution performance measure, and stakeholder analysis results. These are the guidelines which are used for us to conduct the current state. Okay, Now if you look into this okay, elements, okay, here we have these 8 elements in analyzing the current state. Okay, number 1 is business needs, number 2 is organization structure and culture, and 3 is capabilities and processes, and technology and infrastructure, policies, business architecture, internal assets, and we have external influencers. So these are the elements. We have 8 elements here. So we are to analyze the current state, we need to go through 8 elements. These 8 elements are business needs, organization structure and culture, and like capabilities and processes, technology and infrastructure, policies, business architecture, internal assets, and external influencers. Okay, now let us try to understand about the business needs. Okay, now business needs, here the problems and opportunities of the strategic importance of now what is the need? But that is what from the current state where we have to go to the, why we have to go to the future state is that because there is some need, because of it we need to go there. Okay, I'll tell you, suppose if you take this pathway example. Now the need is that the tat time is very high, so we have to minimize on the tat time. That is one point. And second point is there is a scope of error because of too many timesheets to be considered, clients to consider, kind of thing. So human error is there. So that's the very reason human there it is prone for human error because of so many what we say sources of information is there. So here in that the problems are like humans are tended to do errors because of lot of data that is handled by a single individual. So the time and efficiency would be like efficiency would be less and time consumed would be more there. So to address this we may come up with that. Okay, you got me? And maybe identified at different levels of the organization. Now here the business needs, like let me say uh, we have to understand from, let me say we have multiple stakeholders. So from the recruiter point, what is that we, what are the needs that are given there, and from the accounts officer what is the needs, from the clients what is the needs, like we will be understanding what can be the need from different levels. We can understand this, so we have to identify it from that levels. Okay, and need to ensure correct problem is being solved. Now it's not simply I'll classically give you one example. One of my previous projects may, we didn't realize what is the business need, but whatever the client told we blindly followed it and we gave it. Later on the client came back and said this is not what I want to have so and so report. Now it is something like if they want so and so report they should have told us about it, because later on reports are different from actually the processes. Okay, so we have realized that actually what we are trying to understand, solve that particular problem, we need to understand it's not always what the client expresses is that. Sometimes we need to understand it by doing some analysis what exactly they need and what is the problem here. Okay, now the problem here is mostly like, if you can understand, it is like bulk data. The problem is about the bulk data, and it is most confucius because of many mappings that is happening between clients and requirements and JDs, and JDs and recruiters and let me say the what we say candidates for interviews, those pipelines. There's a lot of many to many relationships are there. That's where the problem comes. So you need to understand it from that perspective, what exactly the problem area is, what we have to which problem we are going to correct problem. We have to identify the correct problem and then we have to solve it. Fine. And next we have to understand the organization structure and culture. Okay, now there we have to understand the formal relationship between the people and beliefs, values, norms that drive the actions, and assess if cultural changes are necessary to better understand and achieve the goals. Okay, now it's like what we are trying to see here is now the work culture, organization culture, how it is there, and what is the structure. Is it like flat structure or we have hierarchies? So we need to understand what is that. We need to understand the current state, how it is actually happening from these aspects. Okay, and then we will go with the capabilities and processes. We need to understand present uh, current state mein what is the organization capabilities and what is the process. Is it capability centric or is it process centric view? We have to understand both it. And here infrastructure and technology means what is the infrastructure they're using, what technologies they're presently using, that we have to be that we have to understand it. Okay. And then we have the policies. Now every company has their own policies, so we have to understand those policies, that company policies, and also governing body rules and regulations, if it is there, that we have to also consider it. Okay. And then we have this business architecture. Now business architecture means it is very very important for us to consider the business architecture, because let me say you are initiating a change that on one particular area. Don't focus only on that particular area, you should also understand the entire business, how this particular change will impact the entire business. The business architecture should be understood before you could make this change. So you need to understand the business architecture and the impact of this particular change on the business architecture. Okay. And then you have to identify the internal assets, like what is being used, and who are the external influences. Now external influences would be like the competitors, customers, suppliers, political and regulatory environments, technology, and microeconomical factors. There are so many parameters which is there, so we have to identify all these fact influences, what is there with us. Okay. Now once we do with these 8 elements, okay, once you actually work on these 8 elements, okay, so here you can understand these 8 elements. You have to go each and every point, and you have to understand it, and then we have to look into the output. What is the output we are going to make it up here? Okay. So the output of this particular state would be, you are going to describe the current state. You have to describe the current state. Okay. You're going to describe the current state, like the context and relationship among the enterprises, scope, capabilities, resources, performance, culture, dependencies, infrastructure, and external influences. All this you will be describing the current state, and then you will also come up with the business requirements. So what is the problem, what is the opportunity, and what is the constraint defined based on an understanding of the current state. You have to define it. This is the output of analyze current state. This is the output of the analyze current state. Fine, got it. And then how we are going to define the future state. Now defining the future state, like where we have to reach. Now we have to determine the set of necessary conditions to meet the business need. Okay. And for that, you have to define the future state at an appropriate level of detail. That means till where we have to reach and how we are going to reach and what parameters we have to consider. All this at that granular level, till what extent it is required, we have to come up with that level. And we allow strategies to achieve the future state to be defined, to be identified and assessed. Okay. Provides clear definition of outcomes to satisfy the business needs. Future state value can be assessed. Consensus among the stakeholders of the shared vision of the outcome, identify the components of the enterprise affected by the change and their boundaries, and define appropriate performance measures. Now, for you to reach your future state, okay, the present state is very, very important for you. That means whatever we have seen about the business needs, organization structure and culture, capabilities and process, technology and infrastructure, policies, business architecture, internal assets, external influences, all this will be considered. Along with that, we have to understand the business goals and objectives and the scope of the solution space, and what are the constraints in which we have to drive this from the current state to the future state. And we have to identify so many assumptions, and what is the value we are going to bring in because of this particular change. We have to identify it. So all this we are going to make it up here. And if you see here, it is going to take one input. Okay, that is business requirements, and we will define the future state. And if you see the guidelines, like we have to consider constraints, current state description, metrics and key performance indicators, and organization strategy will be considered as the guidelines. And we have 3 outputs. What are those 3 outputs? Business objectives, and we are going to define the future state description, and then we have the potential value. These 3 will be the outputs for us. Okay. And then we are going to understand okay, the business requirements, we know about it. And now let us look into uh, the elements. In elements, we have this business goals and objectives. That means where we have to reach, what is the business goals we have, what are the objectives we have, and how that long-term goals are broken down into specific objectives and linked to measure the assessment, and linked to measures to assess the achievements. That means what is our long-term goal and what are the short-term goals, and how these short-term goals will reach us, will make us reach the long-term goals. We have to understand the goals and objectives, and first of all we need to understand the business goals and objectives. Before we could start anything on the future state, we need to clearly understand it. Okay, and then we need to understand the scope of the solution space. That means it defines which kind of options will be considered while investing possible solutions. Now, like most of the times, it would be like the cost factor, and the second would be like how it is being implemented and how the stakeholders are showing interest in driving this particular change and where they are more comfortable with. So these will be understanding it. And sometimes few sentiments of the stakeholders will also be considered while defining the scope of the solution space. Okay, and then we are going to understand about the constraints. That means what it describes the aspects of the current state and the future state that may not be changed. That means few things will not change. In such cases, how we have to actually handle this particular change, we have to understand it and carefully examine to ensure that they are accurate and justified. Okay, so constraints like what will not change, we have to understand it, and based on it we have to drive it. And the remaining, like we have seen this organization structure, the same thing from as is and what is to be, that we have to identify it, and the capabilities and process where we have to change, that we have to identify. Okay, and then we have this technology and infrastructure, what are the, how this change needs to happen, where and in the policies where we have to make the change, and in business architecture where these changes will happen, and internal assets where this change is going to happen. Okay, that is being declared here. And here the extra, like we have to identify the assumptions, like must be identified and clearly understood to enable decisions if they later prove invalid. That means assumptions are very, very important here, because sometimes you assume something and people don't know it. Like let me say one of the assumption would be like these stakeholders who are part of it, they know the process knowledge and they are expert levels in so and so areas, you may think, but once it comes to the scenario, they may not know about it. So in such a case, it proves to be fatal there. So in such cases we should be, because if people are not aware of the process 100%, then our strategy would be in a different mode altogether. Okay, so it's like we need to understand, like suppose if people are not knowing what to do next, then we have to keep giving F1 support. That is, every time they can press on F1 and understand what to do in that particular process, what is that they have to understand there. So all these guidelines we can give them in case if they are not well versed with their process. Okay, so assumptions make a lot of difference for us in our development of our solutions. Okay, and then we have to understand the potential value, that we have to evaluate to see if the overall potential value of the solution justifies the change compared to making no change. That is also equally important, because when you make a change and that change is not giving you value, then there's no point making that change. So we need to understand that change as well, right? So these are the 11 elements which we have in defining the future state. So what are these 11 elements? We have this business goals and objectives, we have scope of solution space, then we have constraints. Okay, and then we will have organization structure and culture, then capabilities and processes, technology and infrastructure, policies, business architecture, internal assets. Then we identify this assumptions, potential value, and the potential value. So we have to understand these 9 elements of the future state, how we are going to make this is defined through this 9 elements. Okay, next we will see so many, like as I have said, like we have like techniques. If you consider the techniques, like we have 23 techniques are used here. Okay, we are using 23 techniques here. And when you see this stakeholders, almost all the 10 stakeholders are involved here. Okay, and the output of the future state, that is very, very important. Output of the future state, we have 3 outputs. One is business objectives, the second one is future state description, and the third one is a potential value. So these 3 we should be very clear. Like business objectives means like the desired direction that the business wishes to pursue in order to achieve the future state. So we have to understand it about the business, we have to define that business objectives. And future state description, boundaries of the proposed components of the enterprise and potential value expected from the future state. So that we will be describing them, and the potential value, that means the value that may be realized by implementing the proposed future state. We have to come up with these three outputs. Okay, so you have to define the future state on 11 elements you have to consider, and we'll have three outputs here. And what you will be taking, you will be taking business requirements as the input here. We will be taking business requirements as the input, and the output would be like business objectives, future state descriptions, and potential value. For you to derive to this level, we have to consider those 11 elements. Those 11 elements are what? Business goals and objectives, scope of solution space, constraints, organization structure and culture, capabilities and process, technology and infrastructure, policies, business architecture, and internal assets and external influence. Like we have this, identify these assumptions and the potential value. So these are the 11 elements we'll be considering, and we're getting this three outputs. Fine, got it. Now let us discuss about assessing risks. Now for us to do this, what risks are involved here? Let us try to understand it. Okay, and here the purpose is to understand the undesirable consequence of internal and external forces on the enterprise during the transition to or within the future state to recommend a course of action. That means you know that risk may form a threat to the project or to this initiative or to the change. So we need to understand what are the undesirable consequences of making this particular change beforehand. Okay, for that we have to analyze and manage risks related to the current state, future state, and the change itself, a change strategy or any task performed by the enterprise. Like, and we have to understand the consequence if the risk occurs, impact of those consequences, likelihood of that particular risk to happen, and potential time frame when the risk might happen. And you can use it as an input to identify a change strategy, because most of the times the first thing what they do is risk. They will identify the risk and then they come up with a strategy. Okay, they identify the risk and then they come up with a strategy. Like I can tell you the best example for you is now possibly we all signed our life insurance papers, right? Life insurance documents, you have signed it, and the last 4 or 5 pages terms and conditions would be there. Now when you look into the terms and conditions, it is an elaborative document. Actually it is a risk let me say mitigation policy. It is a risk mitigation policy, that if a risk happens, how if something happens, how it is handled, that is given in an elaborative way, right? Now before they could actually draft that document, they have first assessed the risks. They have first assessed the risk. That means you take any organization, that organization is for profit only. Any organization they build, they actually come up with profit only. So let me say, if for 1 lakh people who have taken the life insurance, what is that possibility that they have to like compensate risk for 1 lakh? Let me say if only they have to compensate 1 or 2 people, then it is okay. Now for 1 lakh, after like a year or two, all the 1 lakh people they have to compensate, then that is a risk to the company as well. So they'll be actually looking into so many parameters, and then based on so many facts and figures, they will actually come up with preparing that terms and conditions. And the terms and conditions input would be the risks. First of all, they'll identify all the risks and they address each and every risk in an elaborative way. You got me? So this risk is very, very important for us to start any change, or to actually predict any change, or to initiate any change. First of all, we have to identify the risk and then we have to go ahead on it. Okay, fine. And then we have this let us see this risks may, we are taking that influences, illustration results and requirements, business objectives, potential values as all these as inputs, and we assess the risk, and the output is a risk analysis result. You will be getting it. And the guidelines and tools, if you see, it is business analysis approach, business policies, change strategy, current state description, future state description, identified risks, and stakeholder engagement approach. All this will be considered as this, right? Now here, okay, if you can see, we are to assess the risk, we are taking these as inputs, and the output is analysis, risk analysis results. Okay, now let us try to understand what we are going to to actually assess any risk, you need the complete information. Then only you can take a risk, right? Generally, I'll tell you, um, small companies take smaller risks, therefore small returns. Big company take bigger risks, therefore big returns. Risk means if at all if they lose something as well, they can sustain. Okay. Now, for us to assess any risk, especially for you to make a change, so first of all, you need to take what are the business objectives and the illustration results means how you're going to make it up. Okay. And the influences, what influences are there, and the potential value because of this project, what value it is going to give us, and the requirements presently, what are the requirements. Based on all this, then you'll assess the risks. Okay. And in risks, if you look into, okay, we have 5 elements in the risks. The first one is unknowns, and the second one is constraints, assumptions, and dependencies. Third one is negative impact to the value, and then we have risk tolerance, and then the recommendations. Okay. Now, very important thing is unknowns. Unknowns means here we may not know about a few things what may happen when we actually start working on it, so we have to understand that. For We have to assess risk based on current understanding, estimate impact of unknowns or uncertain events using historical context of the similar situations, lessons learned from the past changes, expert judgment from the stakeholders. So we have to look into this. Okay. So risks, we have to understand it in this way, like that means we may not know few things about it. So where a risk can happen, from there we have to take it. Actually, risks, as a business analyst, you will not be the right person to assess the risk. You have to talk with the subject matter experts, and you have to talk with the implementation subject matter experts, and you have to talk with the let me say the people who have already done it before. So then from these people, if you can actually talk to them, they will be the right people to give you information about these unknowns. Okay. And then we will be identifying the constraints. You have to consider the constraints, assumptions, and dependencies where risk can happen. Okay. And the negative impact to the value, that means so when we try to understand, we are trying to do a particular thing positive, there are sometimes people perspective may change, and they may consider it to be negative as well. So we have to understand that particular area, right? And risk tolerance, that means risk tolerance means that is risk appetite, what I can tell you, like amount of uncertainty that organization is willing to accept in exchange of a potential value. And we have attitudes towards the risk, like risk aversion, neutrality, risk seeking. Like we will be having so many approaches of risk tolerance, right? How we are going to handle the risk. Okay. Sometimes is like if a risk comes, we will handle it. Sometimes it is like we try to deviate from it. Sometimes we will take a neutral stand there. We will not, whatever, if a risk is going to happen, we will not actually do it. Sometimes we know that risk is going to happen, but we'll take a daring step. Likewise, we will be making it. Okay. And finally, we will come up with the recommendations. We have to understand overall risk level and the stakeholder tolerance towards risk to recommend a course of action. So what risk they can do it, we have to understand it. Based on it, we can take a decision on it. And here, okay, when you see, already we have seen this guidelines and tools there. And after that, we have this techniques. If you see here, we'll be using 12 techniques for this. One is financial analysis, interviews, lessons learned, mind mapping, okay, risk analysis and management, root cause analysis, surveyor questionnaire, workshops. Okay. And almost all the stakeholders are involved here. And the output would be risk analysis results. Risk analysis results means what we have discussed so far will come out as an output. Okay. It is an understanding of the risk associated with achieving the future state description and the mitigation strategies used to prevent, reduce, and the impact of likelihood of a risk occurring. Now, just if you want to understand about this, okay, if you take our case study where the risks are there, I'll tell you, risks are there like assessing about the unknowns. Let me say, if generally I'll tell you, um, you remember this pathways the case study, right? Can anyone suggest where a risk can happen in that particular process? Okay, I'll give you a clue. Let me say we said that one recruiter will work for certain time and the timesheet is built. Here we are not a recruiter may not work end to end for that particular recruitment. So in that 1 hour, whatever work this recruiter A may do, next day recruiter B may repeat the same work because he may not be aware what recruiter A have done. So likewise, he may do once again the same follow up to the other person, because if you talk to a person and you understand what he writes, the personal touch will be lost if multiple people talk to the same stakeholder or to the same candidate. So that is a risk, like repetition of work can happen there. Repetition of work can happen there because of the timesheet, because nobody is given the responsibility of recruiting closing a particular position end to end. So that can be one risk. Okay, and another risk is that a single candidate can be projected to multiple interviews, and the problem is that if he's selected in all the interviews, then the problem comes in this way, like we are missing, like let me say selected in four companies, and he will accept only one company, the rest of the three companies may we are losing a prospective candidate. So that's the very reason, if a candidate, if the first interview he is like almost done kind of thing, then we'll not encourage him to go to the next interviews, because he's going to close it here. Likewise, we have to understand so many parameters where the risk can happen, right? So these are the, like I'm just giving you a thought for you to food for thought, for you to understand the risk or what happens in that particular process. Fine, got it. And the next one is define the change strategy. Now, defining the change strategy, how you are going to define this change strategy, that means from the current state, how you are going to reach your future state. Okay, for that we are going to understand this. Okay, here we are going to develop and assess alternative approaches to the change, and then select the recommended approach. That means, let me say, to reach the future state, if we have like 3-4 approaches, then we will understand all the 3-4, then we'll study all the 3-4 approaches, and then finally we will say that so and so we can actually adopt to, we can work with it. Okay, and it describes the nature of the change in terms of context of the change, identified alternative change strategies, justification for the recommended change strategy, resources required to move a desired future state, and how the enterprise will realize the value after solution delivery, and key stakeholders involved in the change. Okay, and the transition states while working towards the future state. Now all this, that is what from the current state to reach the future state, what all is required, we have just identified it here, so it is covered here. Okay, and then if you see define future, define this change strategy may, so the inputs what we are going to take is stakeholder engagement approach, current state description, future state description, and we have this risk analysis results. So those we take as inputs, and we have here these and two outputs we are going to come up with. One is the change strategy and the other one is the solution scope. One is the change strategy and the other one is the solution scope, we will be getting it. And guidelines and tools, if you see here, we have business analysis approach, design options, and solution recommendations, we have it here. Okay, now let us see the elements of this change strategy. We have 5 elements here. Okay, so we have 5 elements here. The first one is the solution scope, the second one is the gap analysis, third one is enterprise readiness assessment, fourth one is change strategy, and the fifth one is the transition states and release planning. Transition states and release planning. Okay, now here what we have to do is that first of all we have to define the solution scope. Solution scope means here we have to define the solution boundaries, okay, enough details to enable the stakeholder understanding. That means where we are going to reach, how the solution is going to be described, there we have to understand it. And here we are going to describe how the proposed solutions enable the future state goals. Okay, for that we will be looking into this okay, like capabilities, data, processes, resources, okay, business rules, organization, okay, organization structure, technology, okay, then the okay, technology, wait, okay, so we have to go through all these parameters and then we have to understand it. Okay, and then we will go with this gap analysis. Gap analysis means here we need to understand the difference between the current state and the future state, and okay, we have to understand the difference between the current state and the future state, and how we, in which areas we are going to make a change. Here we have to understand it. Okay, and then we have this enterprise readiness assessment. That means suppose if you give a solution, is the enterprise is ready to accept it and ready to work on that new change. You have to understand it, right? And then it is coming to the change strategy. Like here the key activities and events used to transform the organization from the current state to the future state. Here we have to understand it. Identify the preferred change strategy from the several options through a business case. That means how this can happen. That means a change strategy means we have to consider all the current state parameters. Along with that, for the change to happen, who are the stakeholders, and what is the context involved, and what is the mindset of the stakeholders to bring in the change. And this change is happening because of a technology. Let me say, is that technology is like suitable here, and our stakeholders are capable enough to use that technology and get that advantage of the new application. All this will be understanding in the change strategy. Okay, and the transition states and the release planning means like before like to reach the our future state, in between we have this transition states to actually go with, and we have to identify those transition states first, reach to them, and from there you can reach your future state. Now for that, how we are going to make it up is we have to understand how we are going to plan the releases, like in an iteration model or in an evolutionary way. Likewise we will be identifying it, and thereby we will be seeing it. Okay, generally in few applications what actually happens is that we give a beta version, beta testing they do. So based on the actual data, possibly we may need to refine the application functionality to actually uh, understand the practical challenges when they start working with the actual data. Okay, so test data sometimes may not be sufficient enough to simulate the real-time challenges. So in such cases we go with a beta version. Beta version means the entire application would be up and running and you'll be working it as a normal application, but it will not be updated in the main things. It will be in the intermediate servers only. And if any challenges we are facing, then based on it we will identify the challenges, why they are coming, what is the limitation of our application, and where to make the changes. Like that we will be doing it. So one such strategy will be this. Okay, and here when you see this techniques, we have this like for this we have like 20 techniques which we can use it in this defined change strategy. For this change strategy we have 20 techniques to use, and then we have stakeholders involved are 10 stakeholders we have. Okay, we have somewhere around 10 stakeholders we have it here. And the output of this defined change strategy is we have two outputs. One is the change strategy and the other one is a solution scope. One is a change strategy and the other one is a solution scope. And here the change strategy is okay, the approach that the organization will follow to guide this change. Okay, and then the solution scope means the scope of the solution that will be achieved through execution of the change strategy. That means how we are going to make it this particular change, that is the solution scope. So here if you see here, okay, so this particular strategy analysis has 4 tasks. One is, the first one is analyze current state, the second one is define future state, the third one is assess, we are going to assess the risks, and fourth one is we are going to define the change strategy. We are going to define the change strategy. Okay, and here if you see that in this particular these particular tasks involve more techniques and stakeholders. More techniques and stakeholders are involved here in this particular state. Okay, and if you look at the elements of the current state, we have to analyze about the business needs, organization structure and culture, capabilities and process, technology and infrastructure, policies, and business architecture, internal assets, external influences. And when you look into the elements of the future state, we have 11 elements here. One is business goals and objectives, scope of the solution space, then constraints, then we have organization structure and culture, capabilities and process, technology and infrastructure, policies, business architecture, internal assets, and then we identify assumptions, then the potential value. And when you look into the elements of the risks, we have unknowns, constraints, dependencies, assumptions, negative impact to the value, and risk tolerance and recommendations are there. And coming to the elements of the change strategy, we have solution scope, we have gap analysis, we have enterprise readiness assessment, we have change strategy, and we have this transition states and release planning are the elements here. Okay, so the change strategy is something like here we have to take the project and we have to understand the current state and where we are going to reach the future state. Both we have to understand, and based on the current state requirements, the current state and the requirements given, we have to come up with this change strategy. We have to come up with the change strategy. So here strategy analysis, it is governed in multiple ways. We have to understand the current state and we have to define the future state, and we have to assess the risks involved in doing this particular change, and we have to define the change strategy. We have to define the change strategy. Fine, got it. So these are the like tasks which are there in the change strategy. And what I want you to do is please work on this because Pathvista case study, I want you to work on yesterday's topic like KA3, like requirements life cycle management, that I want you to apply it on that, and also KA4, that is strategy analysis. Both you have to apply it and complete the document and send it back to me. And also I want you to write all the exams till KA4. I want you to write exams till KA4. So what all we have covered so far, I want you to write down all these exams there. Okay, fine, got it.